to redo this again. I know, yeah, last night I did this for you guys, and it didn't load. It's always exciting. Okay, let's let this come up. All right, so these are just really like basic words you're going to need to know to be able to take your test well for Cambridge. For all of like your AICE sciences, I don't really know about the humanities classes or math classes, but these are the command words, and so this is going to be suitable for marine and for environmental. I used examples from both. Okay, so command words are going to command you in how to answer a question. So like I said before, you might know I could teach you so much about the ocean, and you might be able to write factual things that are legit, but if you don't know how to answer the question, that's not helpful. I also use the example of you might know how to turn on a car and drive it around, but if you get to a sign and it says yield, or you see a U with an arrow, and you're like, I don't know what that is. Well, then you don't know about U-turning, or you don't know what yield is. If you saw a yield sign, you're like, I know how to drive this car, but I don't know how they want me to drive the car. So you could have all the facts, but you might not know how to apply those facts. So the first one we're going to come across is define. Define is the vocab term. So you would have define on one side of your card with a picture of what most likely you're probably going to do, like either you're probably going to draw a dictionary, or maybe like an electronic dictionary or something. Maybe even showing like how some things do like root words. Anyways, define is really simple. It is you got to give a straight definition, but Cambridge is really picky about their definitions. And to know like, well, I don't want to get there, but how much of the definition you need to give, it'll tell you at the end here. So right here you see there are the amount of marks that this is worth. Marks is what they'll call it in Britain, but we would in America call them points. So this is worth 1 mark. So it's just the simple definition of it. It says define the term ecological niche, and this is going to be one of those words that you guys like know by heart because they're so picky about it. It's an organism's role in its ecosystem, or an organism's role in its environment. Okay, our next one, I can't make myself smaller. The next one we're going to come across is what do you understand by, or what is meant by? And in here, the entire like text definition that Cambridge gives us is really wordy, and even as your teacher, I'm like, what are they trying to say? So I went through and highlighted in yellow really like the main parts you should be honing in on for your definitions. Like on the define one, it really is just the literal definition. There's not much you can change around with that. But what is meant by, it's going to imply you need a definition, a Cambridge definition, and then a relevant comment about it. Most likely, we're looking for you to give an example. So using a named example, sometimes it'll say using a marine example. I don't know if you can hear that. She's singing Frozen. Hold on. Hey, Olive. Ollie, can you shut the door, please? Bless her heart. Would you shut my door, please? Thanks, honey.
Oh, I forgot my book.
So we're going to give an example. So again, it's a niche question. So it says using a named example, which is going to be a marine example. You're never going to give like a terrestrial land example. Always use a marine example. In marine, if it's environmental, you aren't going to be forced to pick any sort of ecosystem example. But using a named example, and this is a marine question, what is meant by the term ecological niche? So I'm going to give the definition, the role of an organism. And then this is just pushing it a little bit, but it really is the role of an organism in its ecosystem. And then I did give an example of it. So what is meant by is kind of just pushing that define command word one step further. And if we look at the bottom, it's worth 2 marks, so 2 points. So I'm like, okay, it can't just be an example. I have to also, or it can't just be the definition. I have to also be giving an example of it, and then I'll get you the 2 points. The way I do my answers and my answer keys for you guys, I bullet the points you're able to put. Next one, state. State is similar in how easy it is and it's like to find. But state is looking for like maybe just a numerical answer. State the amount of hurricanes in the 2014 season, right? They might give you a graph of them, and you might just have to be like, okay, these ones were past that maximum sustained wind speed to make it a hurricane. And it's just a simple, maybe one phrase, one word answer. It says the numerical answer can be easily obtained just by inspection, just by looking. You don't need to do any kind of calculations. You don't really need a supporting argument. Sometimes it might say state and explain. So then you might be looking at, okay, I'm going to say something and then give a reason for why I'm saying that. Let's touch on this one a little bit more. I know for some of you guys, if you've had me before, like my environmental students, if you had me before in Marine, then this is like, you know the answers to these questions already, and this is clockwork for you, but this is good practice for everybody. State 2 features of hydrothermal vents that would classify them as being extreme. And it says 2 features, it's in bold. And if I look at the end of the question, it is worth 2 points or 2 marks. I'm going to probably start calling it marks and get out of talking about it in an American term. So 2 of those features is going to be, for example, really high temperature at the vent itself. All right, and that's 1. Now, on this same line, I put there's no light. That's 2. Even though I didn't put it on the number 2 line, this one is 2 for sure. Now, they only grade the first 2. On my answer key, I will give you every single answer that they are allowing you to put, because my example, if you have 2 shirts to wear and one gets a hole in it, or you forget one in the washing machine, it's not dry, you can't wear it, now you're down a shirt. If you have 6 shirts available and you have to always be able to pick from 2, you're probably not going to, run out. So I don't want you to limit your knowledge. So 2 features. If you give 3, they don't care. They're grading the first 2. If you give 4 and the first 2 are wrong, the next 2 are correct, they grade the first 2. Pay attention to that 2 right there. I am picky about it on any test that I grade of yours, because I want you to be cognizant of that, and I want you to be like trained that it is 2, it needs to be your 2 best. And again, it is only 2 marks right here. You can't get more than that. List, and here's another one. List is kind of like a state. List, again, requires a certain number of points, or however many they say, typically about 1 word. No elaboration. You don't need to say why you're choosing that. And again, it says where a given number of points is specified. For example, in the question, it says list 2. Where it is specified, it should not be exceeded. Don't go past it. You're wasting your time. So you can only list the number of things that the question is specified. List 2 factors that can cause mixing of layers in water column in the open ocean. Again, if I wasn't sure, I go over here and it's worth 2. 2 is bolded. Storms can mix, waves can mix, upwelling can mix, strong wind. And I underlined strong because that had to be there. It's not just wind. And then currents. But again, they're grading the first 2. So despite me putting 1 here and 1 on the number 2 line, I actually did 1, it was storms, and the other one was waves. Even if the one on your number 2 line is correct and the other one you put on the number 1 line is incorrect, they're grading the first 2. Just like we do in any kind of like Germanic language, we read from left to right. And so that's how they're going to be grading you. Describe the data or describe a process. So describe. Describe is really like, walk me through this procedure, or walk me through what you're seeing on a graph. I'm going to pause this really quick and send a message out to second block real quick. Okay. Just had to attend my Zoom meeting real quick. Okay. So describe. Describe is a big one. Describe and explains are big ones. Describe, you're going to see so much in I know specifically in the Marine class with data. Describe is really heavy too in environmental, but it's more so of like processes. But like really a lot with data. So describing a graph. If you are, this is exciting. If you are like, I don't know how to talk about a graph. I don't know how to talk about numbers. It is my pleasure to teach you how to dumb this down and you can talk about it. I felt the same way. I'm like, I'm not an engineer. What? I can't talk about that graph. What do you want me to say? How do I say it? I don't know. It moves up. I will teach you like very simple scripts on how you can talk about this graph. And that should hopefully make you pretty confident about it. All right. So describe, I'm going to do describe A. And if you have, again, vocab words that are have an A and a B term with them, keep them on one card. Keep them on one card. So describe with data. So you might have to describe numbers in a table or a graph. And most likely it says where possible, reference or like pull actual examples from, like cite from that graph. So if I say that's a positive, that as something increases, the other thing increases. Let me take that back. I'm going to use the graph as the example, the actual graph. I'm going to use the data or the points on there. Okay. So actually use the numbers. Can I zoom? Close caption. No, I can't zoom. Okay. So I'm looking here. My x-axis is age of a whale carcass in months. Oh, carcass is a dead body. And then on the y, the number of species living on the carcass. So really this graph is saying like, as your dead whale sinks, hits the bottom of the floor, as it starts to age, there's going to be some species that are going to come and live on there. And they gave us data to actually graph this, but then once we had it graphed, we have to talk about it. It says describe the relationship. So how one thing is affecting another. And that's going to be the time that the whale carcass is at the bottom, and then how many little organisms come over to live on it. So describe the relationship between the age of the whale carcass and the number of species present. And so I'm looking here, and my graph is moving towards like the positive axis side, right? These numbers are getting bigger if you go towards the right. So I'm going to say as the age of the whale carcass increases, because all of these lines are moving over. And then what is going up here? I need to compare it to the number of species on there. This line isn't moving down. We're not losing organisms. We're gaining. As the age of the whale carcass increases, the number of species and I'm looking at the number of species on the carcass also increases. Boom, 1 mark right there. If I look at the bottom, and I can't zoom in fully, but if I look at the bottom, it has a little number 2 after this question, the describe question. So I know it's worth 2. I'm going to get 1 from just saying that relationship. As the age of the whale carcass increases, the number of species increase. That's 1. But then because it's worth 2, I need to be like, where can I get that second point? Prove it. Prove yourself. Prove it. Prove yourself. I'm no longer trembling. Frozen's on in the other room. I do that a lot. So we're going to prove it. You're going to use the data. Use the actual numbers that they give you. So the easiest one for me to see is like this big increase right here. So on a normal paper, you'd be able to read this bigger. But I know this is right here. This is 5 months. And then where this other point is right here, this is 15 months. It's a big jump. But I'm going to say, okay, at 5 months, we have 15 species. And at 15 months, we had 32 species. I know that's 32. So I'm going to say between months 5 and 15. And I'm just choosing those 2 points. You could do it for any of these. You could do it from 5 months all the way to 58 months, whatever. I'm just going to choose these 2 because they're sticking out to me. So between the 5 months and 15 months, there was an increase of 17 species. And I did 32 minus 15. So my relationship was as one increased, the other increased. Prove it. Okay, cool. Well, from 5 months to 15 months, there's an increase in months. They gained 17 new species. And there's an increase in species. So I just supported my own statement. Your data has to support the statement that you made. So that's the second mark at the bottom, and maybe that toolbar is showing at the bottom, so you might not be able to see it. But at the bottom, I have a little bullet mark, and it says data. It has to support that, and that's where your second mark is going to come from. Okay, and then we have describe a process. We need to give a step-by-step process for a statement of like how something happens. And so describe a mutualistic relationship between algae and coral. So I need to describe or talk about, I don't need to say why, I just need to describe how they do this, how algae can benefit coral and how coral is going to benefit algae. And you might say like, okay, well, how much do I write about? Look at your marks. This is worth 3 marks. So I need to at least bring up 3 things. Could you go more than 3? Absolutely. You're not limited to just saying 3 things. This doesn't say describe 3 points in a mutualistic relationship between coral and algae. No, like you're not limited to that. And really in describe command words, they're not going to limit you. So go for more then. Go for more. I would say give yourself at least 1 extra or 2 extra points just to buffer yourself. Sometimes you might not have that answer availability to put all those extra answers. But that's where I come in, and that's where I'll help you try and remember what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for an answer. Okay, so the describes, lots of describes. Explain, and give reasons or give reasons for. Explain is the biggest, and by biggest, I mean like the most writing involved, the biggest command word. That a lot of times coincides with describe and explain. So I'm going to give a little breakdown of, sorry, my chest hurts, of why, of how describe and explain could be different. It took me a couple of years to myself like hone in on this difference when I was teaching this, but if you're going to describe something, so let's do the weather. Let's describe the weather right now. I'm just going to talk about what I see, what I feel, right? The weather, it is sunny, it's a little bit windy, and I haven't been outside, but I'm sure it's humid because I heard it raining. So it's warm, right? I know it's warm, so it's probably like in the 80s or something. So I can describe it like that. Now, if I said describe and explain, go for it. I don't know if you heard that. That's funny. She goes, I have to go poop. I love her. If they said describe and explain, I'm going to describe the outside just like I did. Yawn. Okay. I always yawn when I talk too much. And if I was going to explain it, that's the why. So it's warm and it's sunny. Why? Well, it's a summer season in the Western Hemisphere. And another why for why is it warm? Where we live on the planet, we are tilting towards the sun right now. And we're only about, I think, 25, or is it 29? 25 degrees latitude north of the equator. So that'll be like, why are we so warm? Why is it humid? Well, there's a lot of evaporation going on. We live right by the coast. There's also a big storm across our coast as well. So the why, explain is, why is it like that? So why? Are you good, babe? Let me finish this one. If they said give reasons for, it's another reason of explaining why, right? If you said, okay, what's your reason for thinking that? You're actually asking somebody, why are you thinking that? Give me your reason. Give me your rationale. This question that I gave you, I don't want to talk about it now because I'm going to talk your head off about it for the rest of the semester. This is your money shot right here. This question is so popular in paper 1 or paper 2. The first test you take for me, I will give you this question. It is 6 marks. I give you this question because I know you're going to be grilled on it later on. It's 6 marks. It's good. Explain why. Explains many times because you're just going really deep with it. Explains can definitely encompass talking about like a description of something. Many times explain will allow themselves to go hand in hand with a definition. How do you know when to do that? You don't. How do I know when to do that? I don't. I just kind of get a lot of good practice on figuring out situations when they accept a definition for something, just by looking at the answer keys. Like I study the answer keys as much as I study the actually more than I study the text and the content of it. Because being able to answer these and knowing what they're looking for is really important. Now, sometimes I don't take a definition. How are you supposed to know? You don't. So when in doubt, I say give a definition. But the explain command is, again, like your why. So it's taking the describe and then pushing it one more level and saying, okay, why are you describing it that way? Why is it acting the way it is? Oops. Discuss. For a second. I'm just going to take a moment for my personal, my public service announcement that I'd like to give out. I recommend, that you guys become parents eventually. But eventually, like after you're married, I don't care who you marry. Just make sure you marry somebody who can help you. After you have a job, not just any job. Some of you guys have jobs now. A job that has insurance, a job that you can put in for retirement so that you're not relying on your kid whenever you're older. You need to have a car that's not breaking down. A car seat, maybe a license. You don't ever want to be like, Mom, my kid has to go to the doctor. Can you please help me drive because I'm not old enough? Wait till after you're 25, if you can. You're just a different person after 25. Yeah. Girls, go to school. Go to school. Go to college. Go to college. Many times you're going to be paying for college and might not be doing exactly what your degree is. But many times to get a good job, you just need to have that obligatory paper. Like I went to college. You don't want to have to be relying on somebody. But it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. Back to it. So discuss. You're just going to be talking about the critical points in there. Nothing too extra. You don't need to talk about your whys. Just discuss the main points that they're talking about. So discuss requires the candidate to give critical accounts of the points involved in a topic. So just the things that really matter. Discuss the advantages of shoaling. Shoaling is like schooling when fish are swimming in a coordinated way. Why is it an advantage? And this is for the Peruvian anchoveta, really is for an anchovy. What's the advantage of shoaling? And it could be for any fish. So we'll talk about shoaling as well, but I am just discussing the critical points. I wrote a lot on here. I wrote like 16, I don't know, 15 points or so. It's only worth 5. But again, I want you guys to get in the habit of writing down everything you know. Outline. Also, you're just giving essentials. You're doing just some brevity, just some step-by-step outline. And it says 1 example of succession. You guys have had succession in your regular bio classes. And it's only 3 marks. So how do you know what you need to talk about? I'll talk about this question specifically with you guys, but you want to talk about something you can at least bring up 3 data points for, 3 points for. Predict. I couldn't find, between looking through my marine and environmental things, I couldn't really find an example of predict. It's obvious, but you're not expected to know an exact thing. So we're not expected to perform the required answer, but make a logical connection. So recognizing a pattern, predicting how a pattern might continue. I'm going to show you maybe how that could be applied here. So they could say predict how many species would be on the whale carcass at 60 months. You weren't given data for 60 months, right? And they're not expecting you to have this exact answer. You're not going to be like, oh my God, Parrot never told me how many species live on a whale carcass at 60 months. It's not a thing. But to predict this, you're going to use a logical connection. So you'd probably take your ruler and extend out this line and then read where it's crossing at your 60-month area. So that might be an example of how you could have a predict. Deduce. I don't see deduce that often, but deduce is like your prediction, using logic to connect something, and then an extra. Why are you making that prediction? So supporting statement is required. Suggest. So there could be, really there's no main unique answer. It's more of like using a connection, like a logic or content that you know, and putting it into a new situation. Yes, you can, honey. Okay. Applying it into a new situation. So this question, this is with a food web. That's fine. Go get it. You're looking at a food web, and the question specifically says, go get a water, baby. Suggest why there's 2 arrows between squid and fish. I'm not going to teach you specific species about squid and fish or whatever. And I'm just thinking outside the box here. Why? Why are they like able to eat each other? Well, there's not just one fish. There's not just one squid. So the answer for that one, and you're applying this new situation. Go get some water, baby. Use your stool. They can feed on each other because you might have like a little pygmy squid and a large fish could eat it. Or you can have a colossal squid, a very big squid, giant squid, and it can feed on the fish. Also, you got to think about not just species. Yep. Not just species, but life stages. Olive. Here's some water. You can pour it in there if you want. You got to think about life stages. Even if it's a giant squid, huge, even if it's a giant squid, a fish could eat the giant squid larvae, the little tiny little giant squid babies that are floating around. A fish could eat. Gal, I'm on the computer.
I want the water.
Go find it. Go find it, gal. You got your coloring things right there.
It's in Daddy's room.
Remember what I said about waiting until you're at least 25? Ugh. God, I love her. It could also be dependent on their age, on their ages. So what species they are, where they are in their life stage. Yeah. If they're very tiny, a fish could eat it. Find. Find is typically a very short answer. You got water right there. I'm gonna pause it. Find is gonna be like an easy. You might have to be like find the distance between, right, and then maybe just use a ruler to measure. Find the average. It's pretty simple. It's gonna be like calculate, measure, determine. And it is this one is 2 marks. So you actually had to look at a graph to answer this, and you might be like, okay, that's like a 1 answer. Where does the other mark come from? Dun, 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 dun. Include the unit. Include the unit. Really often in environmental, though, and this is not an environmental question, but a lot of times in environmental, I see them now giving the unit. I don't know. I think it's like helping you guys out too much. Like that needs to just be like second nature for you. Hold on, you guys. I told her if she wants to talk to me, she has to raise her hand. She's raising her hand. So funny. She's only 3. But that's your unit, grams per cubic centimeter. And it's worth 2 marks. So 1 mark for the answer, 1 mark for the unit. And then a calculate. So it's when you need a numerical answer, you should be showing you're working. And it's not just something that you're going to get really simply. I see your hand raised. Just 1 moment. Thank you. Very good. I see your hand raised. I love it. I'll call on you in a second. Definitely show your work. Definitely show your work. And even if you're like, I'm just adding, guess what? I can do calculus, but I will make the mistake in addition or in simple subtraction. Promise. I do. Like that's the story of my life. I'm surprised I didn't sing that. But that's, if 2 or more steps are required, always show your work. Always. If you have to do like find a difference and then take that difference, that number, and apply it to the next thing, if you're anything like me, you're going to make a mistake finding the difference. Sometimes I type in numbers backwards or write them backwards. So I find the difference and I have now a mistake. I take that mistake and I apply it to the next math step. No matter what, I'm going to be wrong. You're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot. But surprisingly, the Brits will take on some compassion and they will throw you a lifeline. If you are doing the correct mathematical steps, but they see poor soul just subtracted wrong, but you're doing the right mathematical steps, they will give you 1 mark. Because if your first step is going to or they'll give you something. If your first step gives you a wrong answer, you did the math right, but maybe you put the wrong numbers. That first step gives you a wrong answer. Maybe you wrote it wrong. They will allow you to have at least 1 mark for doing the math right. And they're not just completely sabotaging you on the whole thing. I have dysgraphia. It's not like it's diagnosed or anything. I don't need a doctor to tell me. I know, like, I will read numbers backwards. I don't know why I do. Actually started as I got a little bit older. But for example, this number 1.0260, I very well could write that 1.062. I don't know why. I just do. I have to be really, really specific on, is that the number I'm seeing? Is that the number I'm writing? Is that the number I'm saying out loud? I really have to be specific on that. So that's, I could just literally write the number down wrong. I see students do it all the time. Like, I get to see a lot of work with errors or whatever and where those might come from. It's just a human rushing error. So definitely show your work. I don't care how simple it is. I'll tell you right now, the math in this class is easy. Finding a percent difference is where you're maxing out in difficulty. That's it. Like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, finding an average or a percent change, percent difference. That is the math in here. The math is not hard. The math isn't hard, but we're human. We're going to make mistakes. Definitely show your work. Measure. Couldn't find an example of this. I really feel like I've only seen it once, and it's an A-level test. But measure, you're going to need to actually measure something with a ruler. And I think the question was measure the length of the thallus. A thallus is like the stem on a seagrass. So measure it. They had to literally just on their actual exam paper, take the ruler and measure it. That's like an elementary skill. Definitely with units. Almost done. Notice that these numbers are flipped. This is 16. This is 15. So 16 is estimate. This means you need a reasoned order of magnitude. Really just saying, give me a reasonable number. Don't, nothing crazy. If I said estimate the temperature outside, I'm not expecting you to know, but you're probably going to say I would say maybe 87. I haven't been outside, but I'm not going to be 50. You're not going to necessarily have to do it with a calculation. And so this question came from a graph, and you kind of had to interpolate, which means looking in between points to see what it might be. And if you look, they gave you a range of answers. It could be 4.7 to 4.9. So it's nothing that was very set in stone, black and white. There was a little bit of a range. This question was only worth 1 mark. So they didn't give you a mark for units. That means if you have this question and you write down 4.6, you get nothing. The completion of it with its unit it's 1 mark. You can't get this question right without putting a unit. You can't at all. Sometimes they give you 2 for it, for the unit and the answer. Determine is also kind of like synonymous with calculate or find. The quantity cannot be measured directly, but you might be able to put it into a formula. Very common example, determine the mean size of seagrass, or the mean length of seagrass, or determine the mean population size of anemones. It's going to be an average, so it's not just a standard answer, because it is an average. It is a range. It's what in the middle is. But it can be obtained by doing a calculation. Sketch. Sketch is a good one for you guys because it means you don't have to use a ruler. You don't have to be exact. You do need to be in proportion, but you don't need to be exact. You don't need a ruler. So it's for graph work. You could do a shape or position of a curve. It just needs to be qualitatively correct. which means the general shape, the general trend should be correct. It does not have to be numerically exactly correct. And then our last slide, compare. That's surprising. I didn't find an example. I was looking through marine environmental stuff, but in America, we say compare and contrast. In the UK, they just say compare. So that means compare how they're alike and compare how they're not alike. So compare is not, we don't need to say and contrast. If you are comparing things, we're comparing how they're similar and how they're different. So compare means you need to do both. In America, we only say compare, but we're doing both in that sense. Recognize is just facts, characteristics that are specific to a situation or a process. So you can say like recognize the factors involved in the formation of an atoll. An atoll is like it looks like those like sunken holes in the ocean where there's just like a ring of coral around it and it's a deep blue hole. There are factors involved in that. So classify. You're going to group things based on common characteristics. It's pretty self-explanatory. So classify the following storms as hurricanes. So you might be looking through a list of storms and, okay, this one has the correct wind speed and the correct pressure difference. So yes, this could be classified as a hurricane. So grouping common things. Okay, this is good for that. Thanks, guys.